So I saw a meme the other day. I don't know if anybody is into memes as much as I am. Like everything on my Instagram feed is pretty much meme pages where I just go through. I love to laugh. There's some things that got to take your mind off of the everyday stresses of life. And for me, that's memes. But I saw one the other day that said manuals for cars back, I can't remember, maybe it said 30 years ago. Well, maybe that was only 1990, so maybe it was longer than that, 50 years ago. You used to come with instructions on like how to clean the heads in the engine. Now, the instructions of a manual that comes with a new car, it warns you against drinking the contents of the battery. And so instruction manuals have changed quite a bit over the years, but I remember back in 2007, 2008, when we were getting ready to have our first daughter, just that overwhelming feeling of like, what in the world am I supposed to do with a kid? I don't know how to raise a kid. You know, you get those books, What to Expect when you're expecting, and you kind of read through all this stuff and you're like, none of this stuff makes sense. I don't know what's going to happen. Or maybe you start a new job and it's a total different career field than you were in, and you're just kind of lost and just kind of don't know what to do. Or you're in a relationship and you find yourself somewhere and you come to that question of what do I do? I don't know. It's really hard for us to say that we don't know a lot of times. Sometimes I find myself in situations where I'll get a question asked to me, and instead of just admitting, hey, I don't know, I try and make up an answer because we're so scared of admitting that we don't know. And especially when it comes to religion or our walk with Jesus, sometimes we don't know. Maybe we're not there yet and you're just not really sure about where you're at, or you've got questions about this whole religion, this whole faith thing, and you just don't have the answers. Where's the beautiful thing is that you don't always have to have the answers with Jesus. And today we're going to be in part 2 of our series where we're looking at the fact that this is for everyone. Jesus is for everyone. The church is for everyone. And so even if you've got questions about God, you're not sure about Jesus, today we're going to be joining Jeremy for part 2 of this series. We're going to be looking at how Jesus makes room for everybody, even when we have questions.
Okay, so let's play a little game together. If you're watching this with somebody, I want you to turn to them and look at them in the eye and look at them like I own you, right? Because we're going to have a little competition. If you're by yourself, you can just keep score. High score gets this early, low score gets it late. You'll get it in just a minute, okay? What I'm going to do is we're going to give you some categories. I'm going to give you some explainers of some stuff that happens, and I'm going to give you, I think, 6 of them. And as time goes on, if you can guess the category, the earlier you guess it, the more points you get. Make sense? All right, so here's how we go. First thing first. Once you have one of these, you will have to care for it for the rest of its life. Okay? Number 2, it will eat all of the time. Whenever, from the time you get it, time forward, it's going to eat all the time. How about the third one? Its care, food, and medical expenses are going to get exponentially expensive over its lifetime. The fourth one, it will mess up your backyard in ways that you didn't think were possible. Number 5, you will have to clean it from head to toe, at least often at the beginning. And the last one is, it's a good chance that you're going to have to pick up its poop. Now, if you said a toddler, you're not wrong, okay? But if you said a puppy, that's exactly right. So if you said it early, you win. If you said it later, sorry about that. But it's a puppy. Now, puppies are interesting, aren't they? They're interesting as long as we keep them in a category. That's what I'm learning. My girls were really little when we got a puppy the first time. Her name was Molly. Molly was 8 weeks old. She was a Maltese Shih Tzu mix, and she was just a wonderful little dog. And we had her for almost 15 years. Just recently, we had to put Molly to sleep. It was a sad, sad time for our family. Terrible moment, really, honestly, because she was just getting much older and her kidneys were giving out. Not long after we got rid of Molly, we started having this conversation. Is it time to get a puppy yet? Do you want to get a puppy? What do you think about getting a puppy? Right? And as long as that idea stayed out there as a puppy, it was easy to consider, wasn't it? I'm learning this, that as long as it's a concept, as long as it's a category, like a puppy, it is easy to discuss and dismiss. But once you give that puppy a face and a name, it is yours. That's exactly what happened to us. When it was a puppy, are we ready to have a puppy? Maybe, maybe not. Do you really want to let a puppy in and out all the time? Yes, maybe, maybe not, right? Can we afford all the food for a puppy? Maybe, maybe not, right? But once we met the dog, we can afford it, no problem. We can let it out all the time, right? Because once the dog has a face and a name, it's no longer a category, it's a real deal in your life. And I knew it was over the minute we drove over to Brownsville. We have a guy that used to go to Journey moved out to Brownsville, and they're breeding golden doodles, and they had a litter of golden doodles to pick from. And I knew the minute we saw mom and dad dog at the door, and we walked inside and started holding those real puppies, it was no longer a category. It was now had a face and a name. So meet Milo. This is Milo. Milo is our brand new puppy, and we're excited to add him to our family. But what's important about it for us is that Milo is no longer a category. He now has a face and a name. And that's important for us to talk about today. Because our categories make it simple for us, don't they? Your brain is wired in a way, my brain is wired in a way to categorize things so that they're easier for us to process. It's one of the ways that God's wired us as human beings. We make sense out of things by putting them in categories. Like if I said to you, what is a trustworthy, dependable car that holds its resale value well? You probably have a category or a brand that you're thinking of. In fact, Mercedes-Benz has spent a lot of time developing a category for trustworthy cars that hold their resale value better than other cars. And to be honest with you, they may not be trustworthy and they may not hold their resale value, but they figured out how to get us to categorize them as a trustworthy car that retains its resale value. Same thing's true for us all the time. What if I said, can you name a state where people tend to vote more Democratic? You probably have a state or a category in mind. If I can say, hey, name a state where people vote more Republican, you can probably name a state or a section because we've kind of broken down into categories. If I can ask you any example, you can say, well, those people or these people or that group or this group does certain things. It's part of human nature to categorize things. But can I say this? It's part of our nature to categorize things and it's helpful to us, but it's not helpful when it comes to people. People defy categorization. There are times when we are bigger than the categories that we've been placed in. Let me ask you that question. Would you rather be defined by the category that kind of describes you? Or would you rather be defined as the person that you are? My guess is you'd rather be defined as the person. You don't want to be thought of as black or white or Asian or Hispanic. You want to be thought of as you. You don't want to be thought of as male or female. You want to be thought of as you. You don't necessarily want to be lumped in with all the other anythings that describe you. I know that's the case for me. I'm more than my big personality. I'm more than my pastoral role, right? I'm more than a Christian. I'm more than all those categories that people put me in. I'm more than that. I'm Jeremy. I'm unique to me. And what I love is when people can see past the categories and see the person. That's important for us to get because that's exactly what Jesus did. Jesus didn't see categories. Jesus saw the person. When everybody else saw categories, Jesus saw a real person. And that's important for us. We're going to look at a particular story where Jesus did exactly that, where he didn't see the category. He saw the person. There was a man who was born blind. And this man was not just a man. I mean, it wasn't just a guy that was blind. He was a beggar. And a lot of those people, you hear that? Those people, beggars, they were around. They'd hang out outside of the temple, outside of the city gates, and places where people would pass by a lot of times and maybe feel guilty that they couldn't help them. And so they'd toss them like a couple bucks or that kind of thing. We have it even today, the same idea. Well, these beggars were around, and there was this man who'd been there, and he'd been blind since birth. And his disciples, Jesus' disciples, had a legitimate question. And they said this in John chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. It says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, Why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? Man, there's a lot of assumptions and categories in that, isn't there? It's like there's easy way to go, hey, these people act this way. Was it because they all have a problem, right? They're all here. All these beggars are here because of their sin or their parents' sin. And what about this guy? Was it their sin or his parents' sin? A lot of categories, a lot of assumptions, and we all do it, right? But what was going on right then was something that Jesus wanted to illustrate. You see, Jesus didn't see a category. The disciples saw a category. These people are all here for one of two reasons. They sinned or their parents sinned. Which one is it for this guy? And Jesus said, well, this is the answer. He says, it's not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so that the power of God could be seen in, what's this last word? Him. He wasn't a category to Jesus. He was a person. It's important for us to realize that. And maybe if you're listening today and you're a little reluctant to follow Jesus, maybe you got a little bit of question, you got a little bit of pushback, it's all arm's length for you. Well, I want you to know that Jesus doesn't see you as an unbeliever. Jesus doesn't see you as a person who's far from him. He sees you. That's awesome part of it. Jesus doesn't make room for people. He makes room for one person. Jesus didn't make room for prostitutes. He made room for Mary Magdalene. Jesus didn't make room for tax collectors. He made room for Matthew. He didn't make room for people who were hot-headed. He made room for Peter. He didn't make room for idiots or boneheads. He made room for me. And that matters to me, that Jesus sees this person, not the category that he fits in, not the assumptions of who he is. What happens next is pretty powerful. Now remember, this blind guy is right here, just kind of working, sitting alongside of where they're at. He hears the disciples ask, what's wrong with this man? Why is he blind? Because of his sin or his parents' sin? And he hears Jesus see him. That's crazy, isn't it? That Jesus sees him. Don't you want to be seen? Don't you want to be seen and loved and accepted exactly where you are? I do. And that is so powerful. Exactly what happens next is he is seen. And I can imagine in this man born blind's heart, kind of just this spark of hope that burns up. Can you imagine it? Every time you should read the Bible, you should put yourself in it. You should use your imagination and ask yourself, what does it feel like to be this person? What does it feel like to be that person? And I can imagine when he hears Jesus say that the power of God was going to be seen in this man, I imagine he just got a little bit hopeful for a second. It began to spark up inside of him for just a minute, and then he hears something not what he expected. He hears Jesus spit on the ground. That's not a great feeling, right? If you're blind, you're going, oh man, that wasn't what I was hoping. He said the power of God would be seen in him, and he hears Jesus spit on the ground. He hears the spit fall to the ground and thud in the dirt. Then he hears Jesus kneel down and begin to mix the spit in the dirt and make mud. And then he does this. It says he spit on the ground and he made mud with the saliva and spread the mud over the man's eyes. And he told him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. Siloam means sent. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. It's not what he expected, is it? I mean, he kneels down and he makes mud out of his saliva, smears it over his eyes, and then does all of that, and then tells him to go wash in this pool named Sent. That's crazy, isn't it? But here's what's interesting to me. The man did it. He didn't think about it. He didn't consider it. He didn't weigh his options. He had mud on his eyes. Now, he could have wiped his eyes off. He could have wiped them off on his sleeve. He could have just rubbed it and said, get off of me, man. Why are you doing that? But for some reason, maybe it was the fact that Jesus saw him. Maybe it was that he wasn't just one of those beggars to him. Maybe it was because he saw that person, that this man made room for Jesus in his life. Man, I think that's important for us to get, is that I think he responded to the fact that Jesus made room for him. When we make room for people instead of categories, people make room for Jesus. And that's exactly what happened. Jesus made room for this man, not for the category this man fit in, but Jesus made room for this man, and the man began to make a little bit of room for Jesus. He trusted Jesus just enough to try it out. So he took himself over to the pool and washed his face off in the pool of Siloam. And the next thing he knew, he could see. He could see again. Like, not again, he could see for the very first time in his life. He'd been born blind as a child, never been able to see, and now he could see it all. He could see all the people walking around on the streets, taking this beautiful sight for granted, looking down at the ground. We know this all the time, right? We're on our phones scrolling by and just looking over life. When a man that we had just seen would look at us and go, man, are you missing it? Are you crazy? And so he went back and he's like, I got to see this place. I got to see all the people that have never seen me. And so he goes back up to where he was healed and he begins to see the things around him. And he's pretty excited. But not everybody's excited. There are some religious leaders in town and they do not like this idea. They've heard about all this that was going on and they are madder than all get out. Like, you see, there was a law in the land that you had to protect the Sabbath. And one of the things that you couldn't do on the Sabbath was make mud or mortar. And Jesus had done that. It didn't matter that he just kneeled down and made a little mud and put it on a blind man's eyes. And it doesn't matter that that man saw again. Like, it doesn't matter any of that stuff. What matters is that they didn't like that he disobeyed the rules without their permission. And so they get fired up. And so they start asking the man what happened. And they said, you got to tell us what happened. And he says this. He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes. Go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. And when I washed, and now I can see. What's crazy about it is that you see those words he used, the man they call Jesus. Now remember, a few minutes ago, I didn't know who Jesus was. Then Jesus saw him. And then Jesus made him see. And now he's like, you know this man they call Jesus? I'm not sure I make a lot of room for him, but I'll call him the man that they called Jesus. He put mud on my eyes and made me see. And it's pretty crazy. And they don't like this answer that they get. And so they push in harder. And the man's getting a little bit frustrated. And you can imagine why. I mean, like, he's like, I just got my eyesight I've never seen before. And now all of a sudden I can see. And I want to see lots of stuff. And you ugly dudes are not on my list. Right? And so he gets a little bit frustrated. And the Pharisees asked him, he says, so he told them, he put mud on my eyes. And when I washed it away, I could see. He's like, look, man, here's the bottom line. When he put mud on my eyes, I washed it away and now I can see. And they pushed in harder. They're unhappy like crazy that this even would possibly happen. And so they push in harder and they're like, well, who do you think he is? That's their question they really want to get at. It's not just what did he do. They want to put Jesus in a category. They want to call him a sinner. They want to discredit him. And if they figure if they can take away his face and his name and his actions and shove him into a category of sinner, then they won't have to deal with him anymore. But look at what this man says. It says, then the Pharisees again asked and demanded, who were the blind man, and demanded, what's your opinion about the man who healed you? And the man replied, I think he must be a prophet. That's crazy, isn't it? I mean, even the next verse, it says, I don't know whether he's a sinner, the man replied, but I was blind, and now I can see. That's crazy, because think about what happens. He goes from, he was a man named Jesus, to now he's a prophet. You see what's going on? Jesus made room for the person, rather than putting him in a category, and that person made room for Jesus. He goes from this man named Jesus to maybe he's a prophet. All I know for sure is this. I used to be blind, but now I can see. He's beginning to see that his experience with Jesus is what's really changing him. All that he did was trust Jesus enough to try it out. Trust Jesus enough to go, I don't know if it'll work or not, but I'll go rinse my eyes off. And they literally just trusted him enough to try it. And once he tried it, he said, man, I went from he's a man named Jesus to I think he may be a prophet. It's not quite who really Jesus is, but he trusted enough to try out, and he's beginning to step the right direction. I want you to know this, if you're kind of reluctant on this whole faith story, the difference between people like me who follow Jesus and maybe people like you who maybe aren't sure yet, I want you to know the only difference is that people like me have trusted Jesus enough just to try it. And we're like that man. I'm just figuring it out that every time I trust him, he shows up. Every time I give him just a little bit of room to work something amazing out in my life, he does exactly that. And that's exactly what I'd encourage you to do. Maybe just today, you just trust him enough to try it out. I'm not saying you have to have all the answers. I'm just trusting him enough to say, maybe he's something more. Maybe he's more than just a guy they call Jesus. Maybe he's something more substantial. And that's what happened with this guy. He said, I think he might be a prophet. I think he might be from God. And he says this in verse 33, if a man were not from God, he couldn't have done it. So all this man did was just simply trust him enough to try him out and then respond to the product he saw in his life. Maybe that's what you need to do today. Maybe you just need to try Jesus out. Just trust him enough to try out what he has to say in your life. And then as you follow him, I'll promise you that it'll come out in the end. And as you trust him and try it out, he'll show up in your life. I'm confident that you'll be a follower of Jesus before you even know it. Just like this man. He goes on and it says, he winds up looking for this man. He's like, I don't know where to find him. I want to find this man. And Jesus hears about all that's going on. So he goes to look for the man that he healed. And he says this, when he found Jesus, he says, he found the man and asked him, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man answered this, who is he? I want to believe him. Jesus said, you have seen him, Jesus said, and he is speaking to you. Look at where the man says. Yes, Lord, I believe, the man said, and he worshiped Jesus. Just minutes ago, he was just a man called Jesus. Now he's a prophet, and now he's the Son of Man. Now he's the Messiah, and now he's worthy of worship. Like, do you see what's going on? When we make room for people rather than for categories, people make room for Jesus. It matters to us. So I just want to land with a few things that you can do to move people out of categories and into personhood, into individuality. The first thing is this: recognize that every single person is in process. Nobody has arrived. Nobody around here, nobody you'll ever meet. Every single person that you know is in process. So have a little patience with people and recognize that you are in process. To the extent that you recognize that you're in process, it'll make you much more patient with people. When you realize that you haven't got all your poop in a group, it helps you recognize that you shouldn't expect that others do either. Another thing important that I'd encourage you to do is recognize the value of patience. As you recognize that you're in process, you'll begin to recognize and realize the value of patience. Not tolerance of people, patience. Sometimes people will come to us, I love Journey. We're such a tolerant church. Tolerance is not who Journey is. Tolerance says that you get to define your own truth and I get to define my own truth. And we all just kind of tolerate or put up with each other's truth. That's not who we are. We're not a tolerant church. We're a patient church. We realize that truth is what truth is. God defines truth. And that if it really is true, then I can trust it. And I can trust the God who defines it. And I can trust him to bring about conviction in your life. We're not a tolerant church. We are an unendingly patient church. We believe that if you lock eyes with Jesus, you'll find the truth and we don't have to worry about it. We're not a tolerant people. We're a patient people because we're a people that recognize that we're all works in progress and none of us have figured it out. And we're all just one beggar showing another beggar where to find food. That matters to us. So remember that everyone is in process. And also remember that everyone deals with uncertainty. And we need to be patient enough with people to recognize that there are times when we don't know. We need to figure out that there are people who are broken around us that need us to just be with them. My counselor told me not long ago that when someone is in the bottom of a well, what they don't need is someone at the top of the well going, it's going to be okay, okay. That was my echo, right? And what they don't need is somebody else to jump in the bottom of the well with them and lay down next to them. What they need is somebody to get into the well with them, sit alongside of them, and help them figure a way out of the well. It's crazy how often we do that in Christianity. We scream down scripture verses, it's going to be okay, or we feel the need to just go down and waller in the bottom of the well with them. What people need is for us to just be with them. And honestly, some of the times the very best answer that you can give when somebody's going through a rough time is, I don't know. When somebody loses a loved one and they want to know why, it's best to say, I don't know. Sometimes when people come to me and go, man, why do they make caskets that are only this big? I don't know. I don't know. I don't. You know when the best time to say I don't know is? When you don't know. If you don't know the answer, it's okay to be uncertain. And it's okay just to be with them. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to pass the instruction book down into the well. Sometimes we just need to sit with people and deal with life on life's terms. That's an important piece that we all deal with. We all deal with uncertainty, and we're all works in progress. And sometimes we just don't know the answer to things that are going on around us. The third thing that I want you to get is that sometimes you have to say, I don't know. But as uncertain as we are about information sometimes, I am certain about experience. If humility says, I don't know, experience says, but I do know this. And that's what I want us to get. That there are times like this man born blind who recognizes that something miraculous and amazing has happened in my life, and I don't know all the answers. I don't know who this man Jesus is exactly. I don't know exactly how he did it. I don't know what made it happen, but I do know this. I was blind and now I see. So you know what? While we can speak with humility and say, I don't know, we can speak with experience and say, but I do know this, that God has done something amazing in me. That's the reason why I'm a pastor today. It's the reason why I care to sit down and share this with you. It's the reason why we do what we do around here, is because God's done something big in me. And I believe without a doubt that if you'll just trust him enough to try it out, he could do something amazing in you. He makes room for people, not just the categories, but you as a person. You're not a concept to him. You're not one of those people. You are exactly you, and he loves you. So let me just ask you to kind of wrap things up by doing this. Can you just maybe for one moment call to mind a time in your life when you tried it, when you followed Jesus? What did he do in your life? What was the thing that you look back and go, man, that's when I didn't know what to do. That's when I didn't know who to talk to. And God gave me this. God showed up in your life. When was the last time God showed up in your life? Maybe if you can't think of one, maybe think of this. God brought you here today. God brought you to this moment in time when you could ask this question: what has God done for me? What God's done in your life is bring you to this point and invite you to try him out. You don't have to trust all the information. You don't have to put Jesus in a category. Just simply trust him enough to try him out. So what has God done for you? And the second thing I want you to ask is, what's next for you? Just take a second. What's next for you? What is the next thing that you need to trust Jesus enough to try? Is it maybe choosing to invite somebody that you know that needs to hear that this is for everyone? Is it somebody, is it maybe the next step for you is choosing to be a part of a team, or lean in and go, man, I want to make room for people and I want to be a part of stuff at Journey. So I want to be a part of the online digital teams, or I want to lead a group, or I want to start serving on one of our teams. Maybe that's what's next for you, because it means that I trust Jesus enough to try it out. Or maybe it's giving. Maybe you're going, man, I've trusted Jesus with my time and with my talents, but maybe I haven't trusted him with my treasure. Maybe that's what needs to happen next for you. You need to trust him enough to try it out. Hey, those are all things that are valid in our lives, but we've got to make room for Jesus. And once we do, we just trust him enough to try it out. He does more than we could ever ask or imagine. There's one last thing I want to ask you. What has Jesus done in your life? What's next for you? And then this one question: where are the places in your life, the faces in your life, where you need to lean a little closer into people? Invite them to leave the categories and become real people to you. Who are the groups of people that you need to lean a little closer to? And try to understand them as individuals. Are they people with a different skin color than you? Maybe people with a different voting record than you? Maybe they drink a different kind of coffee than you, or maybe they act a little different than you, or they sin a little different than you. But you need to lean in and see them less as a category of people and more as individual people. Because it's dangerous for us when we categorize things all the time. It's even more dangerous when we categorize people. When we do that, we make this less than the place for everyone that God wants for it. This is a place for everyone.